Gary Lineker is a local black man who is a football commentator for Match of the Day on the BBC. And he has recently got himself into something of a kerfuffle. Now, you might be like, hang on a second, why'd you call him as a local black man? It's like, well, because last year he was like, look, everyone's racist to me in football because of my dark skin.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
No one else did either, because of course he doesn't have dark skin. But anyway,
He's even less black than Meghan Markle.
I know. I don't think he's got mixed race ancestry or anything. But it doesn't matter, because he's basically a virtue signaling fool who is trapped in the kind of what we call the Westminster Bubble, which is the general progressive paradigm that almost all of the talking heads you'll see on TV occupy. And Gary Lineker is one of them. And this is his attempt to become part of a victimized class. See, everyone was just racist against Gary Lineker, it turns out. But the point of all this is that Gary Lineker seems to have defeated the BBC over the issue of migrants, which we'll get to in a minute. Because it was the relevant subject of a recent hangout I did with Bo, talking about how can we save England. Because it seems at this point that there is no positive narrative to our country. The only power, and this is why this segment I think is important, show you the flow of power in this country, is not in the patriotic direction. Mm-hmm. It is only towards the external. It is to the minoritarian side. And even someone as pale-skinned as Gary Lineker is like, yeah, well, I'm a victim of racism. It shows you the power of minoritarian thinking in this country.
Because it's not just this. I mean, he has all of the fashionable left-wing opinions.
Yes.
But I mean, it's not just him. It's like there was a whole set of, well, you call it the Westminster Bubble, but it's even bigger than that, because he's not even in Westminster, is he? He's just part of the...
It's the sort of London central core.
Rod Liddell calls it the bean pesant, or whatever it is. I mean, it's just that whole class of current thing rich people.
Yeah. When I say Westminster, I don't mean necessarily government, but the sort of... the sort of like 5 square mile
set,
around that area where the BBC are, where the House of Parliament are, and all the other TV stations and various NGOs and institutions that are all sort of centred in the very centre of London. They all have a very, very specific set of progressive opinions. And basically what Gary Lineker has done has lent into them strongly, and he's come out of the other side as the winner, which is good if you're an illegal Albanian people trafficker, because now you've got the rich and famous on your side. If you are a regular Englishman, well, now you're going to be paying for all of this.
Because I mean, like I said, he leans into every current thing issue,
pretty much.
But the current thing, at least in the UK, is this small boat issue.
Yeah. So let's just talk about that very quickly, just so people who aren't aware can catch up. Last year there was a record number of illegal invaders coming across the channel. Don't know where they keep getting these dinghies from, but basically they sail out to about halfway point where it's no longer French water. The French Navy will guide them on out, and then the British Navy goes and picks them up and brings them in. And that has been to the tune of 89,000 people in 2022, but there's a backlog because this isn't the first year this has been happening. So there are currently 166,000 people waiting on a decision from the Home Office about whether they can remain in this country after coming here illegally.
Well, and I mean, we see them here in Swindon. I mean, there's like 2 hotels just down the road from here, full of them.
Well, in fact, let's go to the next one. Migrants are, as you say, housed everywhere. In 42 out of 48 English counties, we accommodate asylum seekers in the hotels. This is costing the Home Office £6 million a day. And so if you go to Migration Watch's link next, this is they assess it as being £1.3 billion a year in total. So it's literally costing us billions to have a bunch of illegal immigrants living in 4-star hotels at our expense.
And we could have used that money to replace, like, say, the EU subsidies to farmers.
Yeah,
but instead we're using it on hotels.
Yeah, I mean, the subsidising the farmers seems like a worthy use of the money. Giving it to foreign adventurers doesn't. But what do I know, anyway? So we're just literally just urinating off the edge of a boat into the water, but the urine is money and the water is foreign pockets. For some reason, we're spending $500 million to build houses for Afghan and Ukraine migrants. So I guess they're here permanently, are they? I mean, literally, it's 500 million in total. Shropshire, for example, is 7.2 million for a bunch of houses for migrants. this is 500 million for the whole country. So there's going to be houses popping up with what are essentially migrant council estates.
But they've just steadfast refused for years to build houses for the native Brits.
Yes. Not one single native Briton will have a house built for them, but loads of Afghan and Ukraine migrants will.
Oh, this isn't going to stir up any resentment at all, is it?
No. And the thing about these migrants is the reason I'm not calling them refugees is because I don't genuinely think they are refugees, at least the overwhelming majority. Now, there are going to be a small number from Ukraine who are actual refugees because there's actually a war going on there. Yeah. There will be a small number from Afghanistan who are actual refugees from being persecuted by the Taliban because they were collaborators with the Americans and the Brits.
But
right?
that's a separate list. I mean, there is a whole
there is
a whole process that you can go through in any country.
Yeah.
And the Ukrainians that are coming here, they're not coming over on small boats. They're being flown over because they're going through the proper channel.
Same with the Afghans who were brought back because of the departure of the Western powers.
Yeah,
they didn't have to trek all the way to France and then get on a small boat.
Oh no, exactly. I mean, the people that I walk past on these hotels near us, none of them are Ukrainian. They're all they're basically North African, aren't they?
Many of them are, yeah. Many of them are sub-Saharan African. Many of them are Middle Eastern, but 0 of them are coming from war zones.
Yes.
So one thing that they found in Sweden, where they also have a lot of refugees, is that 79% of them would vacation back in their home country. So sorry, you fled persecution and war because you didn't want to be killed for being some sort of undesirable in your home country, but you just take a holiday back there.
Yeah,
that seems dangerous.
Well, I mean, this is what the current thing is doing. It is conflating people coming from a war zone with people who are obviously coming here for their economic migrants.
Yeah, they're benefit scroungers basically. And then we covered the example the other day of a 28-year-old who decided to go out into the street and stab an 18-year-old through the lung because he wanted to get deported.
That is not good.
No, he wasn't happy with the amount of benefits we were giving him. He was just getting bored because he's been sat around reaping benefits. He was just like...
And he thought, what's the fastest way to get deported?
Yeah. And so he stabbed a kid in the middle of the street, in the back. I know. It's unbelievable, but this is what's happening. And so finally, after all of this, the Conservatives are like, maybe we have to do something about this.
Well, they say that they're going to do
Yes. Now, you may recall...
They haven't actually done anything.
Yeah. Now, yeah. To be very clear, very, very clear... They haven't and won't do anything about this, right? They've been talking about this for many months. You may remember the Rwanda plan. We're going to send them to Rwanda to be processed, and it turns out that the lefty human rights lawyers that Boris used to complain about so much just were like, yeah, but the law says no, so we're going to be like, we're getting paid to make sure that these scumbags get to stay here. And the Conservatives, still having a massive majority in Parliament, could just repeal the law.
Oh, yeah.
Could have done it on day one.
I mean, if they can lock us in our homes for 2 years, they could they could do this in a week if they wanted to.
They could do it in a day. They could just repeal the law, replace it with something the lefty human rights lawyers can't exploit. And what's worse is the Conservatives have said they're going to do something like this. They've spoken, and yet here we are. And so now Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman have put forward I can't remember the exact name of the bloody thing, but it's some sort of
small boats bill of some
the Anti-Illegal Immigration Act or some stupid name like that. Yeah. But the thing is, it's not going to matter because it's just going to get stopped in the courts because the same laws that prevented them from enacting the Rwanda plan are still in place. Yeah. And so, I mean,
but very short summary. The bill basically says if you're going to come to this country, and loads of you will, do it in the legal fashion, and then we will take you. Yeah, that's all it says.
I mean, it's literally, as you can see, Rishi here saying, if you come to the UK illegally, you can't claim asylum, you can't benefit from our modern slavery protections, you can't make spurious human rights claims, you can't stay. Now, I mean, I would consider that be the bare minimum. I love the way that the Conservatives have framed it, though. Denied access to the UK's modern slavery system. Well, I certainly feel like I'm a slave to a modern system. And if you don't come legally, you'll get sent back to somewhere that's free. So, anyway, this seems like perfectly normal, sensible policy making from what should have been something they did years ago when this started happening.
In almost every country in the world, this would be seen as below the minimum.
Yeah. This would be seen as a massive dereliction of duty that it took 3 years for them to get to this point. But at least they're at this point. It's like, okay, that's a good start. And so we get the amazing take from Gary Lineker, a boomer, who makes the only take that a boomer is capable of making. Hang on a second. something vaguely in favour of the native people of a country. Dan, what's that?
Is it going to be Nazis?
Yes, that's right. That's Nazism. Obviously, that's Nazism. Not allowing, murderous illegal immigrants into your country is Nazism. Now, I'm not even making this up. There have been many cases. There was a chap who murdered a girl in Austria and somehow found sanctuary in this country. So how did that happen?
I mean, my understanding of history may be hazy, but I don't think the Jewish people were trying to get into Germany.
No. Weirdly, it was actually they were preventing them from leaving.
Yes.
And they had to flee Germany.
Yes.
Flee.
But as you say, there is only one lens which the boomers can look at these things through.
Yes, there are. There's literally the only lens, and anything I don't like is Nazism, even if it's the absolute opposite of Nazism. The Nazis were like, look, we need to find a way of letting all of these Jews into Germany. Shut up, Gary. Right. So anyway, basically, he had seen on Twitter a video of Suella Braverman explaining, look, actually, it's not right if the British people are taken advantage of by a bunch of Albanian people traffickers and I'm finding it hard not to just call them pirates at this point, coming in and taking the money of the goodwill, taking advantage of the money and goodwill of the British people. And Gary Lineker was like, well, hang on a second. There's one thing I can't stand. It's not having the British people taken advantage of. And so I have to come out and say, no, this is, quote, beyond awful. It is beyond awful if illegal immigrants aren't allowed to break into the country.
I mean, and he is always pushing the edge of whatever fashionable opinion is. But, well, I mean, you're going to cover the BBC angle in a minute.
Yeah, I am, yeah. But we'll get to how Gary Lineker is basically a weather vane for the current thing as well in a minute. So a bunch of people kicked back on him on this, and he was like, well, no, hang on a second. There is no huge influx of refugees. We take far fewer refugees than other major European countries. So, okay, but A, that's their stupid fault, right? I mean, Germany did allow millions in. France did allow millions in.
Yeah, and to be fair, the asylum rules do say that you should stop at the first safe country you come to.
Actually, they don't.
Oh, don't they?
This is a common misconception. For some reason, you're just allowed to trek as long as you want to get the benefits package that you prefer. It turns out that I imagine that France and Germany are probably giving up fewer in benefits than we are. And that's why they're coming.
Yeah, well, that would make sense as to why there's massive migrant camps on the north of France trying to get here. Yeah.
Yes, because the French are just like, no. But the point, Gary, though, there is a massive influx, which is why we have 166,000 who have actually managed to break into the country just waiting on the government's list. And why Suella Braverman's like, look, millions more will come if we let them. And she's not wrong at all. He says, this is just an immeasurably cruel policy directed at the most vulnerable people in language that is not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 30s. And I'm out of order. Yes, Gary, you are out of order to say that literally the government is run by the Nazi Party. Because that's what you're saying with that statement. It's really nothing like it. These are not the most vulnerable. They are foreign adventurers looking for plunder and are occasionally insanely violent. And you are expecting the British taxpayer to not only be okay with the complete erasure of the concept of a border to this country, but also to pay for the privilege of having no borders in this country.
If you really believe in the most vulnerable angle, it's obviously not these fighting age young men. Yeah. It's going to be the mother with 4 children whose husband was killed in an actual war who is doing it properly. She's not the one getting on the boat with her kids. They are all men in their 20s and 30s.
And I mean, any of the pictures that you'll see from the articles as we're going through of the men on the boats, you can see that they're men on the boat.
That's why the mainstream news never uses the picture close up. It's always a zoomed out shot.
Because you can't tell, because they're all, they're huddled up, so you can't tell that they're all young men. Because as soon as you look at any of the pictures, and they will go to great lengths as well to find the one child on the dinghy.
Oh, yeah.
And be like, oh, look, ignore the fact that there are 30 people on this dinghy and 29 of them are adult men.
Yeah, it's either zoomed out all the way or zoomed in all the way.
Exactly, to the one child that they found to use as a human shield. But the point is that Gary Lineker believes a narrative that simply doesn't line up with reality, but it does line up with what he's been told by his filter bubble on Twitter and what all of the people in the little Westminster bubble, the 5 square miles of Westminster that he's speaking to, oh yeah, the poor refugees, that's all he hears, and so that's all he understands. Now, you get people like Lee Anderson, who's the deputy chairman of the Tory party, saying, think this, right? Brits have had enough of listening to Gary Lineker spout the latest trendy takes on politics. Just another example of how out of touch these overpaid stars are with the voting public. Instead of lecturing, he should stick to reading out the football scores and flogging crisps. Now, I mean, he's not wrong, and that's a very working class take, but he's not, like I said, he's not wrong at all. That Lineker used to be on 1.75 million. Then there was a bit of a scandal because of the pay gap between men and women in the BBC. And so Lineker had his wages reduced to 1.35 million.
Still, you can get by, can't you?
He's still the highest paid. There's still a pay gap.
And as I understand, I mean, I don't watch TV, but as I understand, all he does is he waits for somebody to score a goal and he says, oh, look, they just scored a goal.
Well, that is the summary of what he does, actually.
Yeah.
But we'll get to what he does in a second. So now, the Conservatives obviously came out and gave the most milquetoast, tepid response to being called the greatest evil that the British public can imagine, which is it's not acceptable and disappointing to be called Nazis. Very vigorous. But this is for the BBC to deal with. You fund the BBC. You allocate their money, don't you? You get to decide what the regulations of the BBC are because you're the government. And it's the British Broadcasting Corporation that we all have to pay
And to be fair, those regulations are extremely clear. You must be politically neutral. It's in the charter.
We'll get to that. Suddenly, though, because the BBC were like, hang on, Gary Lineker, it's not entirely on that you are being so politically divisive. And Gary Lineker has fallen afoul of his own Twitter feed with regards to BBC's impartiality guidelines before. So they said, right, okay, we're gonna take you off of Match of the Day. And that caused everyone on the progressive left to say, well, hang on a second, what about free speech? The best example I thought was Nicola Sturgeon. Scotland's First Minister tweeted, as a strong supporter of public service broadcasting, I want to be able to defend the BBC, but the decision to take Lineker off the air is indefensible. It is undermining free speech in the face of political pressure, and it always seems to be the right-wing pressure it caves to.
Because those of us who aren't on the woke left, we are used to being banned and censored all the time. Have you ever been banned off Twitter, Cole?
Yeah, maybe once or twice.
Yeah,
it's happened. Yeah,
but these guys, as soon as they get any pushback in their direction, they cannot handle it.
Yeah, I love this. It's always the BBC always caves to right wing pressure. Oh, I bet it does.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, that's just not the lived experience of anyone who isn't left wing, but suddenly free speech matters when it's them being attacked by it. Now they don't care about free speech for anyone else. Gary Lineker, Nicola Sturgeon, they would all happily censor you if they had the power. And so Gary Lineker got a lot of support from his fellow celebrities and football pundits and blah 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 blah. And his son posted this: proud of the old man after a few busy days. Shouldn't need to apologise for being a good person and standing by his word. Is that being a good person, is it? Demanding that we pay millions and millions more for foreign adventurers to come and live in our hotels? Intimidate school children as they go past?
Because these people never experience pushback.
Well, look where he is. Look at this picture.
Yeah.
Just average picture of Gary Lineker and his son in some sort of, ballroom? An awards ceremony or something?
It could be the Ivy. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? God, I've never been anywhere that fancy.
Yeah.
Average football pundit there. Doing good for the world. Totally in touch.
Yeah.
Good grief.
I mean, he's totally elite without realising it.
Well, I think he must realise it when he's in a place like that. Well, he's the highest paid BBC star. He must realise that he's one of the elites. But, I mean, you get people on the other side, like, this Jewish person who phoned up LBC and Nick Ferrari and saying, look, I support Suella Braverman in making sure that illegal migrants don't just come to the country. Does that make me a Nazi? And yes, that makes you a Nazi. Well done. You're a member of the Conservative Nazi Party now. And Gary Lineker was like, okay, you're going to have to delete the tweet, say the BBC. And Gary Lineker was like, no, I am defiant. I will not delete the tweet. And it's like, okay. And he just started ignoring the BBC's calls. Now, I just find this phenomenal because I would have thought that would have been, okay, well, you fired then.
I spent the weekend thinking he must be fired for this because he's just telling the BBC to do one.
Yeah, he is. But no, he's entered into negotiations with the BBC. In fact, if you go to the next one, Gary Lineker said he will keep speaking for those with no voice. He's been totally defiant, and people are like, well, should he not be sacked then? Nope. As I said, though, he was taken off Match of the Day, and a bunch of his fellow presenters went on strike with him. As the Guardian reported, it will be. See, I don't watch football or follow it in any way, shape, or form, so I had to ask my dad, who's watched many, many hours of Match of the Day, which I think is on like Saturday or Sunday afternoons. I can't remember which one it is, but I remember as a kid him having it on for hours on on the afternoon.
It's the kicky ball recap thing.
Yeah, and I'm like, Dad, can we watch something good? He's like, no, go outside. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll go outside. So I had to have a life. But this time, instead of being like hours on a Sunday afternoon or whatever it is, it was only 20 minutes long, and it was actually the match highlights without any commentary or music for some reason. It's like really, the guy couldn't even press play on the music.
All right, so it adopted a kind of funereal tone then.
Well, kind of. I watched some of it, and actually, it was just kind of like a YouTube compilation of like people scoring goals, right? And so you could hear the crowd cheering,
right,
and things like that. So actually, it wasn't.
So basically, the same thing as it was before, but without Gary Lineker sat there saying, "Look, somebody's just scored a goal," and being paid £1 million for it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly. And like,
so it was fine then.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll get into how people reacted to it, in fact, because normally Match of the Day gets 2.1 million viewers, but this week it got 2.6 million viewers.
All right.
Now, it could well be that it's just the fact that everyone is talking politically about Match of the Day, so it's just raised awareness. It's a bunch of free advertising to get the 500,000 extra viewers to go and watch it. But it's what's weird is I went on like so in Britain, if you want to measure the temperature of the public or specific segments of the public, you have to go to specific places. Now, for example, if I went to The Sun is probably condemning Gary Lineker of being unpatriotic, and therefore some readers are going to be like, no, I hate Gary Lineker, I'm not watching Match of the Day, I'm boycotting, right?
Because The Sun is working class, bit more on the right.
Yeah, working class right wing. Yeah. And on the mirror image of The Sun is The Mirror, which is working class left wing.
Yeah.
And so The Mirror kept posting pro Gary Lineker stories.
Yeah, because that's their messaging, isn't it? They're part of this, yeah.
Exactly.
But the readers.
Yeah, and so I thought it would be interesting to just look at some of the top comments on their Facebook page, right, see what the readers thought. Claire says, not a football fan, I hate Saturday nights when it's on. Oh, Saturday it's on. As it's 60 minutes of continual waffle. Last night, 20 minutes, no waffle, so happy. Husband got the husband was happy as he got all the football highlights without the drivel, and happy me as it was 40 minutes shorter. Jan says, unpopular opinion, it's a better format with more action and less talk. Gordon says, I prefer it with no pundits, their opinions are poor anyway. Gareth says, what a refreshing change from the usual drivel.
The only people I know who do watch Match of the Day tell me that they fast forward or pause or when Gary Lineker's on.
Well, that's the thing. We were having a conversation about this in the office earlier. So I spoke to my dad about this. My dad was like, yeah, well, I just wanted to watch the actual football highlights. I'm not really interested in that.
Yeah.
Josh said that his dad always fast forwards the talking. Mm-hmm. And I've seen lots and lots of people anecdotally just saying, I don't like the... Well, my dad's main complaint is their bias, actually, because, like we were saying earlier, the pundits themselves are biased towards like the sort of 5 or 6 top clubs, even though there are like 20 in the Premier League. So, if, like my dad was saying, he likes Southampton, and if Southampton beat Liverpool, it's always framed like Liverpool have bad day, rather than Southampton have glorious victory. Yeah, exactly. So he was always annoyed by the overt bias of the presenters to their favourite clubs. I carried on the Facebook page. They shared a petition for Gary Lineker, which got over 100,000 supporters. So, but the comments were like, I won't be signing, sack him. Lineker is in a privileged position. He's not living in substandard housing, struggling to feed his children and live in a warm home. Yet we give money to the asylum seekers, rooms and hotels for money and food. Refugees are genuine enough, but who are these men who abandon their wives and kids to come here? Benefit tourists. We've always been daft enough to dole out money and healthcare to anyone except the people who are actually entitled to it, and those who have contributed to the wealth of this country. It's time to stop being mugs. Again, this is from the Mirror, right? This isn't the Daily Mail.
I mean, Gary Lineker is the classic fashionable, wealthy person's guy.
Yes.
But the rest of the country, they don't like him.
No.
Even on the left, they don't like him.
Well, there are a bunch of them saying, I used to like Gary Lineker, but I think he's really become one of the elite.
Yeah.
Which is very true. So there's a lot of talk about Gary Lineker doing this to avoid his tax bill, because Gary Lineker has been claiming that he's a freelancer, and HMRC are claiming that Gary Lineker is actually employed by the BBC.
He clearly is.
Obviously is.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you would think that this would be fairly self-evident, just judged on the nature of a contract.
Yeah.
But to make the case, Gary Lineker's tax lawyers are probably going to argue that his social media usage proves that he is a freelancer and not bound by BBC regulatory guidelines.
Right, so he has to win this fight.
He has to win this in order to get out of £5 million of tax.
Oh, okay. I didn't see this angle. Okay, this is
yes. Now that's the cynical take on this. I have no idea if that is the case or not. I mean, I do know that he does owe about £5 million in tax. The one expert they spoke on here, that he will have to produce evidence that shows he is a genuinely independent contractor and he's not controlled, not supervised, not effectively managed. Okay. Fundamentally, the test is if you do not have the service company in any way, blah blah blah. Right. So, and so his Twitter account will be used as evidence that he doesn't have to pay this extra tax.
Right, and this goes a long way to explaining why he wasn't going to back down, even if it meant losing a £1 million salary.
It does make you wonder. Right now, I can't confirm or deny that or anything like that, because as other people have pointed out, Gary Lineker does kind of tend to sway with the current thing. Right, whatever is the popular thing online at the moment, he kind of picks it up. You can go to the next one. Some people just like got Bing Corbyn. Oh, well done, Boris. And it's like, so he's not like, he's just always like that weather vane, like wherever the
popular views are.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever's popular in the Westminster Bubble, he just kind of leans that way, right?
Yeah. Oh, he's an NPC. He doesn't have any opinions of himself.
Oh, yeah, he's a football pundit.
Yeah.
Sorry. But anyway, so the BBC came out and were like, look, we're going to have a frank conversation with Gary Lineker after all of this. The BBC has impartiality guidelines. Yeah. Gary Lineker is being spoken to.
They're really strict as well, these guys.
They are. They're insanely strict. Yeah. Right? He's been spoken to, and we've spoken to him before. We're going to speak to him again. This is going to get resolved.
Okay. What did they actually do?
No disciplinary action.
Right.
The BBC backed Gary Lineker over tweets comparing language. Boss at the broadcaster.
So he won then?
He won,
so He faced them down.
Hang on, it gets worse. So not only is he not even getting a slap on the wrist, right? The BBC say, from our perspective, the situation has been resolved now, and we want to get him back to what he's best at, which is being a brilliant sports presenter. Wow, that's cucked.
Total victory.
It's even worse, because the BBC are going to apologise to him.
What? Oh, no.
Lineker will return to Match of the Day, presumably tank the figures again. The BBC has also apologised for the episode and announced an independent review into its own social media usage guidelines.
They are not putting the woke away.
Total victory for Lineker by just being a woke prick.
Right.
Do you want to hear Gary Lineker's tweets? Obviously,
I think you're going to tell me anyway.
He tweeted his victory laps, right? Lineker said, after a few surreal days, I'm delighted that we have navigated a way through this. I want to thank you all for the incredible support, particularly my colleagues at BBC Sport for a remarkable show of solidarity. Football is a team game, but their backing was overwhelming. Notice how he's framing this, as if he is the authority in charge, and the BBC were being...
He kind of is.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? He says, I've been presenting sport on the BBC for 3 decades, and I'm immeasurably proud to work with the best and fairest broadcaster in the world. Can't wait to get back on the Match of the Day chair on Saturday. And actually, I might even see if I can see how he smugly enters into this, right?
Yeah.
He says, a final thought. However difficult the last few days have been, it simply doesn't compare with having to flee your home from persecution or war to seek refuge in a land far away. It's heartwarming to have seen the empathy towards the plight their plight from many of you. We remain a country of predominantly tolerant, welcoming, and generous people.
I wonder how many he has staying in his house.
Well, 0. But is he in charge now or something?
Well, evidently, yeah.
Is like Gary Lineker in charge of just the country, is he? Like Gary Lineker gets to decide what policy is.
He bent the BBC to his will, who are operating under a strict charter set down by government, and all of that got pushed back because he was just like defiant. No, I'm going to be woke.
Yeah. He should have been fired, but it's not just the BBC that he's bending to as well.
Yeah, it's the government. I mean, they should
government,
now
exactly. Like
they should now say enforce the charter or you're gone.
But no, Rishi Sunak's facing a rebellion because of this.
From Tories?
Rishi Sunak's small boats bill could be from Conservatives, right? The Telegraph put this out on Saturday. Rishi Sunak's small boats bill could be watered down by peers and centrist Conservative MPs concerned over its modern slavery provisions, the Telegraph has been informed. The Prime Minister is also facing possible rebellion from backbenchers with more liberal views on immigration if he fails to set out details providing additional safe and legal routes. So The left gets what they want, and it's Gary Lineker who is going to make it happen. And the British public get to eat S.
I mean, the Conservative Party, the only thing they can serve is Blair's legacy. Just extraordinary.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like, the Twitter bubble has got excited about something, and now the Conservatives are like, well, I guess we better back down. So the British public are not in favour of this. Like, they're not being polled. Like, do you agree? We'll abandon the concept
I
of
know
borders.
how this poll would go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's So anyway, Gary Lineker is now King of Britain, and we are all going to be paying for illegal immigrants to live in 5-star accommodation forever. Thanks, Gary. Prick.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Epoch series, this episode on William Wilberforce. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.